Welcome back to Earth, just in case you've been off somewhere. So I realized I forgot to greet our online community, so I just want to say hi to everybody out there. So glad you can join us. I can't see you, but I energetically feel you. I want to say thank you to Sandy and Robin who guide this process, and thank you to each of you for being here. And for all of us, I'm grateful that you're here too, because I can see and energetically feel you. Yeah, that's a good thing. As we are back on the earth. So this whole month we're looking at the idea of living everyday wonder. That's our year-long theme, is approaching life with a sense of wonder, living from that. So that takes nothing for granted. That starts to kind of look and say, tell me more about this. And so I'll invite you, in case you've forgotten that, to start to bring that into every aspect of your life. Every aspect of your life. And this month we're looking at home. We're looking at the idea of home. Harding Carter, who was a journalist back in the mid-1900s, said, there are only two lasting bequests we can hope to give our children. One of these is roots, the other is wings. Roots and wings. And so that's our talk today. See, we all need both to thrive, don't we? We need roots deep in the earth, and we need wings in order to soar and fly. And yet often we get deprived of one growing up, which can then lead to the stunting of the other. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, yeah. Yes. And so roots are our grounding, our core energy center. We experience that at the base of our spine, if you're familiar with the energy systems known as the chakras or whatever name you want to give it. And we also experience it with our feet, literally our soles on the ground. You know, I came to realize that for years I've been walking around with kind of my energy up around midway up my shins. It's like I did not want to be here. And so I've been working a lot for the last few years on being here, on walking the earth. And I invite you to just pay attention and notice, are you comfortable and rooted walking the earth? Walking the earth with a healthy sense of being rooted. We feel safe and we can be present. We can be present with life just exactly as it is. We don't have to change it. We don't have to shift it. We don't have to pretend that it's something else. We can just be present with life as it is. When we're grounded, we feel safe. And when we feel safe, we can open and spread our wings and taking flight with life. Not against life, not ignoring life, but taking flight with capital L life. And at its best, home is a place where we feel a sense of rootedness and belonging and being loved and accepted, which allows us to feel free to fully express ourselves. Maya Angelou said, the ache for home lives in all of us. But I say it's only an ache if we feel separate from home. So let's look at this thing called home. What if we let go of the ideas that home is a physical space, a certain group of people at a specific time? Because you've been around long enough to know that people, places, and times all change, yes? Yes. So most of us have grown spiritually enough to where, for instance, we have let go of the idea that heaven and hell are places. One's up there, the other's down here, which is awkward on a spherical planet that's rotating, right? Because up here, 12 hours from now, will be yeah. So heaven and hell are not places, they're states of consciousness. One is feeling at one with spirit, and the other one is feeling separate. And we've all been to both, right? Okay? It's said that religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for people who've already been there. So what if we realize that home is not a place? It's not a time, it's not a specific group of people, but it's a state of mind, a consciousness. While many ache for a home that once was and isn't anymore, Others ache for a home that never was. There was a fantasy fed by stories and ads, fed by our own imaginary ideas of how it should have been. And keep breathing, by the way, through this whole discussion. Some of us grew up in homes where things happen, and by home, in this case, I include schools and churches and kind of that whole milieu in which we grew up, and where things happened that ranged from being uncomfortable to horrible. And the process of feeling rooted, of feeling grounded, safe, loved, and belonging didn't happen in our early formative years. I think many of us can relate to that. I myself grew up in that kind of a home. I grew up where my biological father was not my mother's husband, and the husband wanted me aborted. I grew up with parents who literally hated each other. I had a very angry and abusive mother, and then a father who just sort of stayed checked out until he checked out when I was 16 years old permanently, which sent my mother, by the way, into an even deeper rage. I grew up in a home with physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And I tell you this not for sympathy or for you to feel sorry for me, not for comparing childhoods, not even as an excuse for how I am today, but as validation for what I'm going to say next. And what I'm going to say next is, today, I am at home. Today, I am home. And it's not due to people, places, or circumstances, but due to working, lots of working, on my consciousness to heal and claim a true home. And the core healing to allow me and us to be home is to understand, to truly understand, a phrase that many of us are familiar with but don't really understand or apply. And that phrase is, I am a spiritual being having spiritual experiences in human form. Breathe that in for a moment. I am. You are. Say that with me. I am a spiritual being having spiritual experiences in human form. See, we often get caught in our human being perspective, forgetting who we truly are. We look at life from the human point of view. You know, I oftentimes use the metaphor of the sun, and we talk about this, how the sun rises and transitions across the sky and sets, right? And the ancients thought that there was a chariot carrying it across, or the hand of God, some god, or something or other. But we recognize, of course, that the sun isn't moving relative to us, that we're being rotated. Yes? See me afterwards, Ross. For those online, he said, say what? We're being rotated around the sun. And as I ever more deeply let go of my identity as a human being, in other words, relating to life as a human being, that's difficult. Have you noticed? Okay? Trying to have spiritual experiences to fix my human life. We all got into spirituality to fix our human lives. Come on, just look. Yes? Okay. It's the bait. It's the bait and switch that the universe or our inner self or whatever you want to call it does with us, is we think we're getting into spirituality to fix our human lives when we're really getting into spirituality to recognize that we are more than our human lives and to switch gears. But we have to make that jump, that perspective. When we begin to orient and identify more as a spiritual being having spiritual experiences, our questions change from, why me? I'm not the only one. I know you. 2, what do I want to learn here? What am I as a spiritual being trying to communicate to my human self for growing into my full expression as spirit here? Different questions, right? More empowering questions. I'm going to say something. I have to have a little aside. I have not seen this morning's football game, so please do not tell me anything about it. All right, thank you. The reason I'm saying that is because the Seattle Seahawks have a new quarterback, Geno Smith, who is trying to and successfully filling Russell Wilson's very big shoes. And Geno has a saying. He says, "Football is my job, it's not who I am." Being human is our job, it's not who we are. Take a breath. It's not ultimately who we are. We all know, well, excepting for Ross maybe, we all know that we're going to lay these bodies down, these bodies are going to go away at some point in time, yes? And that there is an essence of us that's going to continue on anyways, yes? Okay. Well, maybe, somebody says. Well, let me put it this way. I know it, so you can, if you want to lean into my faith, you can. If you don't want to, that's up to you. But my experience, because I've experienced this, and I've experienced other people who have left their bodies behind, who still show up, as Ernest Holmes once said, I've been to too many funerals where the person for whose funeral it is shows up to believe that anybody ever dies. Okay? Our bodies go away. And on the journey of our bodies going away, and before they do, and while you're here, you'll notice they bump and bruise and get broken bones and things like that. We've all kind of noticed that, yes? Okay? But that's not all of who we are. Being human is our job. Being divine is who we ultimately are. By the way, Geno also has another phrase that says, they wrote me off, but I didn't write back. Which is a great thing for many of us who were written off as children or even as adults to remember. Just because somebody else wrote you off doesn't mean you have to accept that. Don't write back. So as spiritual beings, we are at home. In fact, as spiritual beings, we are home itself. Wherever and whoever we are home. And as we remember and recognize this, we stop aching for a physical home, and yet amazingly, because we have embodied home as our identity, it shows up more and more in form. Because that's how that law works. We don't get what we wish for, we get what we are. And so as I do the work to remember that I am home, you are home, it shows up in form. And this is not to do a spiritual bypass and say, oh yeah, I'm just going to, all that stuff, it was good, it was just for my growth. No, it hurt, right? Anybody? Okay? But to face the pain while going deeper and realizing that although these things happened, and yes, they hurt, I am greater than the things that happened to me. Breathe that in. You know, I have to say I chuckle sometimes at people who wear T-shirts that say, I survived whatever it was. That's like saying I got thrown from my horse and I'm still laying here on the ground, but I survived. Instead of saying, and now I'm going to get back up and get on that horse of life and learn how to ride better. And by the way, we still make mistakes. And we still get thrown sometimes. Many of you know that I used to be a hotshot cyclist, bicyclist. And one day I had come from doing a training for bicycle police from literally all around the world. Where they had met in Seattle, and I did part of the training program for them. And on the way home, I was riding home, and I came up to a stoplight, and I decided to do what's called a track stand, which is where you bring your bike to a stop, you kind of crank your wheel over, and you just stand and balance without putting your foot down. And I was usually pretty good at this. I'm in it, and all of a sudden I lost my balance, and bam, over I fell. And the guy in the Jeep in front of me, I could see him chuckling. And it's like, what's this fool, just learning how to ride a bike? So stuff happens. The question is, do we lay there and feel sorry for ourselves, or do we get back up and live more fully? As we let go of either the delusion of the happy home that no longer exists, or the painful home that doesn't need to continue running and ruining our lives, we find our true home within. And then we can begin to establish roots in that home, knowing that we are safe and we belong, because it's our home after all, right? It's our home. Can I belong? Can I let myself belong? Can you let yourself belong in your own home? Can you let yourself? I asked that question. Can you let yourself belong in your own home? Yes. The home here. So as we establish roots, then, we can spread our wings out and fly, not out of trying to either recreate or rebel against an outdated idea of home, but rather spreading our wings to express our true nature, our true joy, our true freedom, our true who we are. And we can start asking questions such as, what does my authentic spirit want to express as me today? What a powerful question. What does my authentic spirit want to express through me as my human self here and now? Ernest Holmes says all are rooted in this one life. How many are rooted in this one life? All. Your endeavor, then, is not so much to find God as it is to realize God's presence and to understand that this presence is always with you. I love the word realize because to me it's make it real. To realize God's presence and to understand that this presence is always with you. One of the dysfunctions that can come out of growing up in a dysfunctional home is difficulty with boundaries. Yes, somebody chuckled back there. Either not having any or being so rigid with our boundaries. Once we understand that home is within and we create and maintain it, we can create the structures that support living within a safe home of belonging. And for some of us, probably for many of us, this is a learning process, experimenting between too much and too little as we find our way. If we keep at it and if we pay attention, we will find what works for us. And what works for you is not what works for you. Something different works for you, and something different works for you, and something different. And so we don't have to have all the same identical boundaries. What we do need is healthy boundaries, which channels how people interact with us. So let us practice an embodiment of roots and wings for a moment. We'll do a little guided meditation. So I'm going to invite you to breathe and relax. If you feel safe, close your eyes. Notice your feet on the ground. Notice if they are energetically in contact with the ground. Or you're holding your energy up a little bit. Let it come and center. Notice the energy center at the base of your spine. And let your consciousness just be with that for a moment. Not trying to fix it or change it, just being with it exactly as it is right now. And now imagine that energy center and the soles of your feet connected deep into the earth energetically. And let yourself just feel connected for a few moments. Nothing to do, just be at home. Become aware that you are more than your physical body. Let your awareness stretch out a bit. Not trying to make anything happen, just noticing if you can experience that. If so, let yourself expand into a broader sense of home. And if you're not experiencing that, just pretend that there's a broader sense of being and relax into it. And again, let yourself feel at home. Nothing to do, just feel. Now imagine that you have roots which run deeply into the ground beneath you, receiving nourishment from a deep source of love. Imagine that the nourishment from this source runs up through your feet and then runs up through your spine, all the way up to the top of your head, and then out and beyond. Imagine you are growing wings and lifting up, yet staying connected to home. And ask this expanded self, where am I to fly? How am I to express this deep source of love in my life now? How am I to express the freedom of my beingness in human form now? Just listen, like listening to the wind through trees. Just gently listen. And whether you get an answer or not, know that in simply asking the question, in the search for the answer, lies the answer. And you will know it when you need to. Take a moment to enjoy this feeling of roots and wings, coexisting within you. Take a deep breath and let yourself return to the awareness of the physical body in which you're in at the moment, which is a place of home. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Let yourself be back in that body. When you're ready, gently open your eyes. This week I invite you to do two practices. The number one practice is spend time at home, the home within. You can use that meditative process we just did or something else that works for you to just spend time at home so that you start to experience this place more fully, so that it starts to be a bigger reality than the one you grew up in, the physical place that you associated as home. That's number one. And then secondly, practice seeing life from the perspective of your spiritual self. Switch out of the human self and say, what's the bigger view here? What is my spiritual self perceiving here? And maybe what does it want to communicate with me? So that's our two practices. Spend time at home, change your perspective to experience life from your physical self. Are we good with those? Yes. Great. I want to close with a quote from Brene Brown. And yes, we don't have anything else other than this. And she says, belonging is the innate human desire to be part of something larger than us. Because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and by seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging, but often barriers to it. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. So I invite you to this week, as you spend time at home, practice self-acceptance. And we have an affirmation slide. Say this with me, I move fully into my own home within. I am safe and free. And we'll say it one more time. I move fully into my own home within. I am safe and I am free. And so it is. Can I slide right in here? So take a look around at the faces of God. And feel the home that each of you individually and all of us collectively are. Let yourself experience your roots and your wings. Open your hearts. Remember that you are spiritual beings here creating spiritual experiences in human form, and have fun and play. And so it is.